Welcome to BYD Classes, and this class will be the fifth lecture and last lecture of environment and ecology and part of the disaster management. So let's begin. So first topic is disaster management in India. So disaster risks in India. The data facts of disaster risk in India. 50 around 58% of the land mass is prone to earthquakes of moderate to very high intensity, and over 40 million hectares, around 12% of land is prone to floods and river erosion, and 5700 km of 7516 km long coastline is prone to cyclones, and more than 68% of cultivable area is vulnerable to drought. So remember these facts. 58% very high intensity due to earthquakes. Land mass is prone to earthquake. Over 40 million hectares is prone to floods and river erosion, and 57,000 out of 7,516 coastline prone to cyclone and tsunami, and 68% cultivable area is vulnerable to drought. So remember these facts. Next is India's vision and approach to disaster management. Proactive prevention, mitigation and preparedness driven approach for conserving developmental gains and to minimize loss of life, livelihood and property. Vision as per National Disaster Management Program 2016. So make India disaster resilient across all sectors and achieve substantial and inclusive disaster risk reduction by building local capacities starting with the poor and decreasing significantly the loss of lives, livelihoods and assets like economic, physical, social, cultural and environmental, and enhancing the ability to cope with disasters at all levels. So remember these. What are the constraints regarding the National Disaster Management Program 2016 in terms of the disaster? So climate change is expected to increase disaster frequency and intensity, and weak compliance of policies, for example violation or poor implementation of building laws, and asymmetric impact of disasters on vulnerable sections like poor, migrants, elderly, and difficulties in mobilization of large scale financing at all levels, and absence of specific goods and targets in NDMA, lack of fundamental infrastructure, and paucity of trained dedicated clinicians for relief and rescue operations, low community empowerment and capacity building to effectively mitigate, prepare and respond to disaster, and poor condition among multiple authorities, especially at local level as well as the state level. Government initiatives for the disaster management. So National Disaster Management Act 2005 and National Disaster Management Plan 2016. So this is the Disaster Management Act 2005 and National Disaster Management Plan 2016, and NDMA guidelines for disasters like earthquake, cold wave, cyclone, droughts, etc. National Policy on Disaster Management 2009, and National Disaster Response Fund managed by the central government and Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure to save the property as well as human capitals from the disaster, and signed Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction 2015-30. During the Sendai Framework 2015, so remember this, and Model Building Bylaws 2016. So these are the some government initiatives to mitigate the disaster. Strengthening disaster management. What are the solutions? Strengthening disaster management plans and strategies to prepare for predicted impacts of climate change. And expanding financial resources through international collaborations, public-private partnerships, and local or government associations, and raising awareness about insurance among citizens for financial resilience, and incorporate programs to protect the most vulnerable segments of society like the poor, marginalized, women, children, disabled, and elderly, and setting specific goals and targets aligned with the Sendai framework, and undertaking adequate capacity building to prepare citizens and administrative authorities at local level, and equipping existing infrastructure like common service centers for early warning, relief and rescue, and developing and popularizing innovative location specific technologies, materials, designs, and methods. So remember this. And next is under the disaster management, National Disaster Management Plan, Cultural Heritage and Disaster Management. Recently, climate change induced disasters are increasingly posing a threat to world's heritage sites, and key issues is disaster management at cultural heritage sites, such as natural vulnerabilities of cultural site. For example, Bhuj earthquake in 2001 caused widespread devastation to both rural as well as urban settlements, including many nationally and state protected monuments. In 2011, Sikkim earthquake destroyed many Buddhist monasteries and temples. And inadequate risk assessment due to lack of continuously hazard mapping and identifying vulnerabilities. Poor risk mitigation due to poor management, neglect, and lack of awareness, and difficulties in implementing emergency preparedness and response procedures in cultural heritage sites without significantly impacting the values of the heritage sites. Post-disaster recovery and rehabilitation pose a threat to the heritage value and aesthetics. A legal framework for protecting the heritage site. What are the legal frameworks for protecting the heritage sites? Apex body for implementation of protected cultural heritage is the Ministry of Culture, which acts through the Archaeological Survey of India. And national legislation that apply to cultural heritage in India include the following: the Ancient Monuments and Archaeological Sites and Remain Act, an Ancient Monuments and Archaeological Sites and Remains Act in 1958 and its rules in 1959, and Antiquities and Art Treasures Act 1972 and its rules in 1973. So keep this in mind. What is the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction 2015 to 30? It was adopted at 3rd UN World Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction in Sendai, Japan in 2015, and 7 clear targets and 4 priorities for action to prevent new and reduce existing disaster risk. Understanding disaster risk is for the strengthening disaster risk governance to manage disaster risk, investing in disaster reduction for resilience, and enhancing disaster preparedness for effective response, and to build back better in recovery, rehabilitation, and reconstruction. And under the Sendai framework outlines 7 global targets to be achieved by 2030. First target is reduce global disaster mortality, and second, reduce the number of affected people globally, and third, reduce direct economic loss in relation to GDP, and fourth, reduce disaster damage to critical infrastructure such as power, nuclear, railways, etc., and disruption of basic services such as medical, education, etc. And fifth is increase the number of countries with national and local disaster risk reduction strategies. And sixth, substantially enhance international cooperation to developing countries. And last and seventh is seven and last is increase the availability of and access to multi-hazard early warning system. So remember these four are sustainable reduction, and these last three are substantial increases. And next is disaster resilience infrastructure. What is disaster resilience? Resilience is ability of individual, communities, organizations, and states to adapt to and recover from hazards, shocks, or stresses without compromising long-term prospects for development. Disaster resilience infrastructure include vital buildings, public communal facilities, transit systems, telecommunications, and power systems that are strategically designed to withstand the impact of a natural disasters like a flood, earthquake, or wildfires. What are the significance of disaster infrastructure? Uh, disaster resilience infrastructure. So, disaster resilience infrastructure could bring down the economic cost of building the whole infrastructure after natural disaster, and assist in achieving targets pertaining to a reduction in mortality due to disaster, and frequency and severity of disaster events have been increasing, which makes disaster resilience infrastructure inevitable. For example, Turkey earthquake recently happened and devastated many things as well as economic. Of Turkey, and help disaster resilience help in non-disruption of energy, transportation, and telecommunications for an effective post-disaster response. So remember this. And what are the initiatives to strengthen the disaster resilience infrastructure? Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction to 2015 to 30 identifies investing in disaster risk reduction for resilience and to build back better in reconstruction as priorities. And India announced the creation of a coalition for disaster resilience infrastructure after the Asian Ministerial Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction 2016. Inclusion of the Coalition for Disaster Resilience Infrastructure in working groups of G20 group. An infrastructure resilience accelerator fund was announced in 2023, acts as a financial resource and is key to the success of initiatives. So remember these. What are the constraints regarding disaster resilience infrastructure? That lack of long-term plan and institutional mechanism to assess it, an unplanned development in India and less attention towards this aspect, and universal accepted standards are missing, and effective global cooperation is not vibrant, and lack of public-private partnership for implementing the robust disaster resilience. To create a disaster resilience infrastructure, what are the solutions? Disaster resilience infrastructure should be integral part of the policy making on infrastructure, sensitization of people about its importance, and adopting global standards like Sendai framework and review of existing infrastructure on a regular basis. So these are some solutions. Next is Coalition for Disaster Resilience Infrastructure is a part of the disaster resilience infrastructure. So recently India signed headquarters agreement with Coalition for Disaster Resilience Infrastructure, thereby according to the status of an independent and international legal entity to Coalition for Disaster Resilience Infrastructure. What is the headquarters agreement? An agreement between an international organization and host state to determine the privileges and immunities necessary for its good functioning, and it enables Coalition for Disaster Resilience Infrastructure to pursue functions internationally with all rights, immunities, and privileges as per Section 3 of United Nations Privileges and Immunities Act 1947. India has enacted UN Privileges and Immunities Act 1947 to give effect to Convention on Privileges and Immunities of United Nations adopted by UN General Assembly in 1946. What is the Coalition for Disaster Resilience Infrastructure? That it is a global partnership of national governments, UN agencies and programs, private sector and academic and research institutions, launched in 2019 by India at UN Climate Action Summit at New York City of USA. And what was the objective of Coalition for Disaster Resilience Infrastructure? The objective is to promote resilience of infrastructure systems to climate and disaster risk, thereby ensuring sustainable development. Next is this is the related news about multi-hazard early warning system target Z. Okay, so pause the video and read one times. Okay, I need not mug up many things. So initiatives taken in India for the Coalition of Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. Remember this, Geological Survey of India has developed a prototype regional landslide early warning system. Indian National Center for Ocean Information Services has set up a storm surge AWS and Indian Tsunami Early Warning Center. So remember this, inquiries for tsunami early warning system. Okay, set up by the Government of India, and Defense Geoinformatics Research Establishment provides advanced warning of avalanches and global initiatives. The early warnings for all initiative of World Meteorological Organization aims to ensure that every person on earth to be protected by early warning systems by 2027 and global basic observing network to generate and exchange basic weather and climate data and climate risk and early warning system for people living in LDCs and SIDS and risk informed early action partnership to enhance collaboration between state and central government, between state and local government, and between local government and local communities. So remember this. And earthquakes. Remember this, earthquakes. And this is a important that it is a static portion. So you can remember the most important part of earthquakes. So causes of earthquakes such as tectonic plate movements, plates in Earth's lithosphere interact at their boundaries and fault slippage. So remember these terms. Volcanic and anthropogenic activities. Okay, so initiatives such as earthquake risk assessment and mapping by the Geological Survey of India and research organizations have identified seismic zones. Bureau of Indian Standards has developed the Indian Standard Code for seismic design and construction of structures. And National Disaster Management Authorities and earthquake early warning system and inquires for tsunami early warning system. Okay, so remember these. And challenges in management like prediction in almost impossible. Even early warning systems are not much efficient to detect them. And lack of earthquake resilient infrastructure. Indian and Eurasian plates are in activity moving towards each other, and high financial cost of retrofitting. Retrofitting such upgrading or modifying existing structures. So remember this, retrofitting, high financial cost of retrofitting. What are the solutions? Ensure the incorporation of earthquake resilience design features for the construction of new structures. Facilitate selective strengthening and seismic retrofitting of existing priority structures. Improve the compliance regime and capacity development interventions for effective earthquake management, including education, training, R&D, and documentation, and strengthen the emergency response capabilities in earthquake-prone areas. So remember these facts about earthquake. Next is floods. So floods are also a static portion of the syllabus. So you can remember the current situation of floods. So more than 40 million hectare area in India is flood prone. On an average every year, due to floods, 75 lakh hectares of land is affected. 1600 lives are lost, and the damage caused to crops, houses, and public utilities in rupees 1805 crores. So remember these facts. Okay. Major causes, natural causes as well as anthropogenic causes. So remember these facts. Recent examples like Maharashtra floods 2021 and Assam floods in 2022. Schemes, flood management program, National Water Policy 2012, setting up of Ganga Flood Control Commission and Brahmaputra Board, integrated watershed management program. Remember this, integrated watershed management program. And next is NDMA guidelines on flood suggest structural and non-structural measures for flood management. An early flood warning system like Mumbai's integrated flood warning system, constitution of Rashtriya Baad Yojana in 1976 for recommending measures of flood control. So remember, okay. And what are the constraints? So remember these things, that reactive approach focused on post disaster management and lack of integrated management of water resources and issues in land use policy, and possessiveness on part of states and problems in synchronization, collaboration or coordination. More focus on the static part of the disaster management like floods, earthquakes, tsunami, etc. And this is important, and also it is a uh, your general studies paper at of static portion. So remember the recent happened urban flooding in current affairs. Amid flooding in major metropolitans in India, the center highlighted the success of two cities, Davanagari, Karnataka, Agartala in Tripura, as cities which have curbed urban flooding. And what is urban flooding? An excessive runoff in developed urban areas where the storm water does not have anywhere to go due to poor capacity of the drainage system and causing inundations, like in Maharashtra as well as in Chennai. There there have been the more urban flooding conditions due to the excessive runoff, and water cannot go anywhere and causes the inundation of the urban area. Recently example is Indian cities such as Bengaluru, Hyderabad and Chennai often face it. A combination of three aspects, heavy rains, developed surfaces and insufficient capacity of drains, significantly different from rural floodings. As the developed catchments of urban areas increase, the flood peaks from 1.8 to 8 times and flood volumes by up to 6 times. Causes of urban floods: direct factors, climate change, induced weather pattern changes and extreme rainfall, topography, unplanned development and encroachment of floodplains, an increment in impervious surfaces, improper drainage infrastructure. Indirect factors, improper and inadequate drainage infrastructure due to heavy siltation, poor maintenance, outdated capacity. So, improper waste management causing water logging. Next is impacts of urban flooding. Socioeconomic impact such as damage to urban infrastructure and temporary disruption of utility services, economic losses, risk of epidemics, casualties due to accidental fires, electrocution, environmental destruction of biodiversity and wildlife habitats by flood water and contamination of rivers and habitats. So remember these things. What are the solutions? Like adopting integrated ecological approaches, enhancing capacity of drainage system, and creating detailed floods, hazards and zonation maps, and conservation and restoration of urban water bodies, and participatory approach for a risk based early action coordination among stakeholders to mitigate flood risks. Adopt hybrid approaches of integrating or replacing green infrastructure with new blue-green infrastructure, and adopting natural flood management techniques such as creating temporary storage, increasing catchment and channel roughness, desynchronizing peak flows from the tributaries. National guidelines on management on urban flooding by the National Disaster Management Authority, with Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs as nodal ministry for urban flooding. So these are the some solutions to reduce the urban flooding in India. An initiative taken for urban flooding, a Spongy Cities mission. So remember, it was discussed earlier. Okay, what is Spongy Cities and what is the mission for Spongy Cities to like to promote to promote positive interactions between socio-economic systems within the cityscape and with the urban water cycle to enhance local urban resilience and standard operating procedures for mitigating urban flooding by the central government under the Atal Mission for Rejuvenation and Urban Transformation, that is Amrut Mission. Flood management program and uniform system of alerts and warning by the Ministry of Home Affairs, categorizing alerts in stages yellow, orange, and red. An integrated flood warning system like inflows Mumbai. Similar system was also introduced in Chennai. And success of Davangir and Agartala, steps taken by the local government such as mapping of existence existent drainage systems and removal of illegal encroachment over drainage networks, construction of storm water drains to curb water logging and ensure drainage of water after heavy rainfall within few hours. Next is blue-green infrastructure. What is this? An eco-friendly route to combat climate change and environmental degradation by harnessing blue such as seas, rivers, lakes and ponds, and green means trees, parks, forests, elements for flood resilient cities, and blue-green infrastructure is part of the Delhi's 2041 master plan. So remember these facts. Next is landslide. Landslide is also a static part of the syllabus. So remember these things. So what is the landslides? Movement of a mass rock, debris or earth down a slope due to the impact of gravity. So remember this definition of landslide. Landslide is the movement of the earth masses under the existence of the gravity or impact of the gravity. So remember this. Recent example is landslide Manipur, Mumbai and Kerala. Causes of landslide: natural causes, anthropogenic causes. Rainfall vulnerability pattern identified as the single biggest cause. Landslide Atlas of India 2023. India's vulnerability to landslides. Landslide Atlas of India 2023. India among the top 4 countries with highest landslide risk, and 12.6% of India's land area excluding snow covered area is prone to landslide. Landslide prone areas that highest in northeast Himalayas, followed by northwest Himalayas and western Ghats and eastern Ghats. On impacts of landslide, remember this. Okay, loss of lives and social disruption. So these are the generic point regarding the landslide impact of landslides and schemes like landslide early warning systems by GIS under landslide project, National Disaster Management Authority guidelines for landslide hazardous zonation, and Geological Survey of India's landslide susceptibility mapping in different parts of the country. So schemes related to landslide following National Landslide Risk Management strategy released by the National Disaster Management Authority. Landslide hazard zonation maps to be prepared at macro scale and meso level, and awareness programs, capacity building and training of stakeholders, preparation of mountain zone regulations and policies, and adopting different models different models for different regions based on scientific mapping and early warning systems, and proper assessment of environmental and social risks of development projects in prone areas, and structural measures such as improving surface and subsurface drainage, constructing piles, metal beams, and retaining walls. Okay, so remember this. And droughts. Next is droughts. It is also in news. A disaster drought is characterized by a lack of precipitation such as rain, snow, or sleet for a protected period of time, resulting in a water shortage. So remember these things, and remember these facts about droughts. In India, 16% of India's total area is drought prone, and over 68% of snow area is subject to drought in varying degrees, and nearly two-thirds of the India suffered drought during 2020-2022, and severe droughts are estimated to have reduced India's gross domestic products by 2 to 5% from 1998 to 2017. So remember these facts. Drought prone areas here, such as the parts of Jammu region and Uttarakhand, parts of UP, Rajasthan, Gujarat, Maharashtra, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Odisha, MP, Jharkhand, West Bengal. So remember these uh, areas of drought prone, and causes of drought in India: concentrated and uneven distribution, rainfall in relatively short window of the southwest monsoon, and over exploitation of groundwater and suboptimum conservation of surface water, and limited irrigation coverage, prevalence of rain-fed agriculture and poor irrigation techniques, and climate change. Next is schemes or policies of the government: integrated watershed management program, National Water Policy 2012, and desertification and land degradation atlas of India by ISRO, and Jal Jeevan Mission. What is aims under Jal Jeevan Mission? Providing potable water in an inadequate quantity and prescribed quality in the drought prone areas, and NDMA guidelines on drought management with components like institutional framework and financial arrangements, assessment and early warning, prevention, preparedness and mitigation, capacity development, relief and response, preparation of drought management plans. So remember these facts. What are the constraints or challenges in drought management? A reactive and relief centric approach, limited focus on mitigation, adaptation and preparedness, and issues in assessment and early warning like communication gaps, late forecast, conflicting information, low accuracy, lack of accurate and reliable data on water climate parameters, and lack of proper planning coordination between different functioning units and implementation at the ground level. What are the solutions? Adopting of integrated management, adopt an approach of co-development of droughts, early warning and climate risk management approaches, tools, guidelines, and focus on proper communication of climate information, and popularize adaptation strategies like crop diversification, micro irrigation, etc., and improve coordination enabled by the capacity building at local level. Next is heat waves. Heat waves in India as well as in international level, such as the Western Europe heat waves is even more than the other areas of the world. So remember this. Why news? The India Meteorological Department started issuing heat index for different parts of the country based on the air temperature and relative humidity. So remember this. What is heat wave? A period of abnormally high temperatures more than the normal maximum temperature that occurs during the summer season in the northwestern parts of India. Typically occur between March and June, and in some rare cases even extend till July. And one of the natural hazards under National Disaster Management Act 2005. Others are floods, urban flooding, landslide, heat wave, tsunami, cyclone, and earthquake. Favorable conditions for heat wave: that transportation or prevalence of hot dry air over a region, an absence of moisture in the upper atmosphere which restricts the temperature rise, and cloudless sky which allows maximum insolation over the region, and large amplitude anticyclonic flow over the area. Next is IMD criteria for describing heat waves. When maximum temperature reaches 40 degrees Celsius in plains and at least 30 degrees Celsius in hill regions, and based on departure from normal heat wave departure from normal heat wave departure from normal is 4.5 degree to 6.4 degree, and severe heat wave departure from normal is more than 4 degree or more based on actual maximum temperature. So remember these facts. Okay, maximum temperature reaches 40 degree in plain and 30 degree in hilly regions. So remember only these things. Okay, reasons for intense and prolonged heat waves in 2022: weak western disturbances and anticyclones more pronounced in cities. Impact of heat wave was more pronounced in cities due to urban heat islands. And climate change is also a catalyst effect in the heat wave disaster. And impacts of heat waves, like heat related illness like dehydration, heat cramps, heat exhaustion, heat stroke, and in serious cases death. Okay, and remember anatomy of heat wave. What is the process of heat wave? The high concentration of pressure makes it difficult for other weather systems to move into the area, which is why a heat wave can last for several days or weeks. And high pressure inhibits winds. It also prevents clouds from entering the region. The end result is a continual build-up of heat at the surface that people experience as a heat wave. So remember this. Impacts of heat wave. Heat related illness. Okay, heat related illness and ecosystem damage like accelerated melting of glaciers, impact on biodiversity, deterioration in air quality, drying up of shallow aquatic ecosystems, and impact of agriculture like drought conditions and decrease in crop yield, adverse health impact on livestock due to heat stress, economic impact like lost wages due to diminished working hours, drastic increase in energy demand, flood price volatility, and social impacts like higher exposure and vulnerability of certain sections like street vendors, construction, and farm workers. What are the solutions to prevent the heat wave? Establishing heat action plans. in every city to protect communities and save lives from extreme heat with elements like community outreach to build public awareness, early warning systems to alert residents and interagency coordination, capacity building among healthcare professionals, and retrofitting of infrastructure with cool roof technologies to keep indoor temperatures lower and can help decrease the dependence on air conditioner and increasing the amount of and access to green space and other cool environments like pools, air conditioned spaces in urban design, mitigate climate change by reducing greenhouse gas emissions and minimize the rise in global mean temperatures, and heat wave mitigation in agriculture, opting for right crop varieties, bathing animals, and adopting the mulching technique. For example, plastic mulching, timely sowing and adoption of heat tolerant wheat crop varieties, etc. So remember this. Okay. Next is forest fires or wildfires. What is wildfire? It is an unusual or extraordinary free-burning vegetation fire that may be started maliciously, accidentally, or through natural means. Occurrence in India, the most commonly reported during March and April, and causes of the wildfire are natural and anthropogenic. Natural like lightning, friction of rolling stones, volcanic eruptions, and due to anthropogenic slash and burn cultivation, accidental fires from campfires. And what are the significance of controlled and forest fires? Natural forest development and regeneration, and reduced risk of a forest fire, and increasing forest habitat opportunities. India's vulnerability about the wildfire. More than 36% of India's forest cover is prone to frequent forest fires. Recently happened in most of the areas of wildfires in Chhattisgarh, Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, etc. And 6% is very high, highly fire prone, and almost 4% is extremely prone. India State of Forest Report 2021. Recent examples like Rajasthan, Sariska Tiger Reserve, Madhya Pradesh, Ladkoi Jungle से 2022, and Odisha's Timlipur Tiger Reserve in 2021. Remember these things. An impact of wildfires or forest fire on ecosystem, changes in species mix, habitat structure, loss in forest cover, and on environment like changes in microclimate, release of vast quantities of CO2, increased soil erosion, changed soil composition, and socio-economic impacts threatens livelihood of people who are directly or indirectly dependent on forest ecosystems. What are the constraints regarding forest fire? Absence of proper institutional mechanisms for tackling forest fires within the forest department, lack of holistic approach with main focus on the response and less importance to other aspects such as mitigation, preparedness, awareness creation, etc. No provision for separate budget and insufficient financial allocation under the central schemes. Inadequate capacity and training of forest departments officials for forest fire management. Extreme gaps in knowledge sharing and its use due to lack of coordination. And schemes related to forest fires. National Action Plan on Forest Fires. Okay, so okay, and centrally sponsored forest fires prevention and management schemes, initiatives by Forest Survey of India near real-time forest fire monitoring and issuing alert large forest fire monitoring using SNPP VII RS sensor early warning alert based on forest fire danger rating system and FSI 1 Agni Geo portal. So remember these things. Okay, and solutions, these are solutions such as recognize and response to the impact of climate change, dedicated institutional mechanisms with forest department covering all aspects of forest fire management, develop and update forest fire manuals, empower communities and local authorities, and integrate indigenous, traditional, and contemporary fire management practices into policy and enact appropriate legal framework at national and state level. Adequate preventive and preparedness measures such as clearing fire lines, removing the fuel, dead wood or leaves, etc., and recognize forest fires as a disaster type. So remember these things. Okay. Other disaster, other disasters in news such as chemical disaster. You can remember the and cold waves. Not much remember these things. Okay. An overview, some disaster, and you can take an example of these disasters. Okay, next is geography, and we will discuss in next lecture in geography part. Okay, in geography parts. So I will end this lecture, and geography part of geography will discuss in the static part of the syllabus. Okay, so this main 365 also will be ended here, and you can remember that each and every lecture is very important for the mains perspective. So you can watch videos again and again and tackle those topics which are covered in this mains 365 which are in news. Okay, so you can watch 2 to 3 times before the exam, so you can tackle the difficult questions in exam, and early you can watch these videos before taking the exam or taking the question paper solution or solve the questions. So here I will end the lecture. So keep watching and subscribe my channel, and if you have any query, so put in the comment section, so I will reply. And if you have any doubts, so you can ask me in the telegram as well as in the comment section. So remember these things. So thank you for watching. Have a